Hello everyone, I am Sristi Sengupta, professionally a storyteller and an aspiring novelist. It has been an opportunity of immense honor to have been selected as #skills top 5 winners for the Lockdown Story Writing Challenge, and today I will be reading out loud my winning entry, The Clabber Maid. I could only have gotten home by a train. So was everyone else's case. None of us could. This pandemic broke out, maybe not all of a sudden, but it certainly found us unarmed. Ironic enough to the human race, well, we're never really ready. I was caught back at this village somewhat sequestered from everything man has taken under habit. It should be misjudged if labeled uninhabited or uncivilized. It was rather private to nature herself. The natives lived there, reminding that humans too are a part of nature. My team and I made through almost all of the zones in the northeast on schedule. However, the journey to here pushed us far over our time and budget. From Darjeeling via Sivok up Rangpo, this place is a mile or two beyond Kaluk in North Sikkim, without any route otherwise by road. Our current project asks of us to audit resort properties under construction or presently functioning in the whole northeastern India. Honestly, this entire region, being dependent on tourism, hosts a lot of housing properties turned into guest houses, resorts and inns. We had 3 months to roam the valleys, winding roads and gnashing slopes in quest of asylums amidst the wild, and possibly put a price on that handedness. We were hardly kept updated about the circumstances worldwide because of the faltering media for communication. Although these seem like common scenes in the ethereal altitudes of Himalayas, with resources to sustain life steadily giving away under a pandemic, you don't enjoy this solitude as you would during a vacation. The 5 of us had hitchhiked to Kaluk only to find that all the homestays had been shut off, guests taken to isolation back in Gangtok, and no one was around to even hint us about the estimated valuation of the colorful 2-story log huts placed like pins on the lush overgrowth of the slopes. There were terraced fields but not a man in sight. The people were inside their homes, and smoke from the iron chimneys was visible. The foggy mixture of vapor and coal bits kept rising up until a gust of wind blew across to disturb the chain that originated from the chimney mouth and went farther up with the unvarying azure of the sky behind, looking like his handmaid's tie-dye apron. We stood in the middle of the road, clueless, breathing slowly. We either had to wait for a wagon or jeep which could give us a fine ride back to Rangpo, or seek asylum in one of these short-built ethnic mountain lodges. The former seemed next to impossible as night had started to close in already. The overhanging mountains with patches of tall pines and firs turned into silhouettes of ancient behemoths. Imperative that it struck each of our minds at least once, maybe they really were. Tired with time and hustle like us, failed in their quest for refuge, and finally becoming the refuge themselves. Satish rang a bell on the right corner of a green and blue door of a wooden house with lamplights flickering in the windows. He backed off, whispering to me, "What is the Nepali word for hello?" I wasn't yet as out of wits as him, so I calmly brought to his reminder. "You can greet a pigeon with Namaste, Satish. It's a universal code of conduct. In fact, it's on trend these days. But pigeons hoot and fly away. Maybe bother us for a bread or two, then leave," Lily replied, side-eyeing my calmness. "And these are humans. Might bother us for a bread or four. Sustenance is a universal language," I replied. Kushal started. "Besides her claimed universality, everything else actually makes sense. Also, we should be more worried that no one has yet answered the door and my watch says 7 o'clock already." After some moments, we heard a little click on the door latch, subsiding the perpetual song of crickets and ghastly silence of the night. An old lady wearing a wooden cap with woolen braids on either side answered the door. The bags under her eyes spoke the credence of harsher years. There was a little girl some feet behind her, in a clenching maroon pajama, staring at us and our obscene amount of luggage. Mansi almost stepped over my foot in her receding palpitation when she tried to greet the lady with a broad grin and clenched hands. Hotel right. Here no open. The little girl spoke in a sweet, humble tone, yet there was a certain authority and dignity in her speech. 4 or 5 heads popped up from the sitting room and adjacent kitchen, almost in unison, almost in exulting pride for the little one's undertaking. The old lady smiled at us, kindly, with a blinding charm radiating from her tanned neck, ears, jaw, and her beautiful, pearly eyes. We went agitated. We couldn't be, but we felt hopeless. The house would have welcomed us if it were any other day, and not at the verge of fatality if too many humans gathered close to celebrate something. Say life. We were sitting at the steps when suddenly it came to my mind. Hotel right. What if she meant that there was a hotel rightwards? The road went uphill, bending at a distant nook, so it had to lead somewhere. Besides, our only choices were between starvation and footsore, and I wasn't certainly in the mood of sleeping in the bare wild without having had a single meal all day. Hotel right, guys, get up. We've taken enough risks in the past 24 hours, so this last one might actually turn out to be gainful. I stood up, trying to shake the exhaustion from my aching body. Sorry to say this, but no, I cannot move an inch of my body only to go nowhere. Lily couldn't finish with her resort as she grimaced, trying to itch almost all the spots on her body that wild mosquitoes had bit. Well, you actually might not have to move a bit and find yourself swiping off a cliff tomorrow because the mosquitoes will carry you away for good, I replied. Kushal chuckled and got up. He picked up 2 of the luggage and threw the bulkier one at Satish. Hotel right or hotel wrong? We got to see for ourselves. It's almost 8, and if there really is one, it won't be checking in for long. We tried keeping safe distance from each other, but a strange howl from the distant, repugnant darkness flew our senses back to the medieval times when man moved in herds. No distance was safe distance. We arrived at an abundant toll check. It seemed as if it was built only to be forsaken. There was nothing to ramshackle of a police depot. Hotel wrong. Mansi turned around and looked at me with disappointment. I hung my face, feeling the fog closing up on us, the temperature running low, and the weather calling us out on our indecision. The road goes further up and I see a faint light. Should I go and check? Our faces lit up with a little hope on Satish's remark. If there's lights, there has to be people around. Satish slowly started walking up the steep cart road. We could see the bright red canvas roof sack rising and falling on his back until he was reduced into a speck in the dense fog. There came no response for at least 10 minutes until we heard a pale cry from somewhere within the abyss. It wasn't an intimidating voice. It was an unknown voice. A short, cloaked and clumsy figure was emerging, running downhill with a beckoning gesture. He wasn't someone you would expect at all in the circumstances that we stood in. Dark complexioned with beady eyes and a perplexed moustache. His features carried most resemblance to the southern parts of the subcontinent. Even in the unstirred shadows, we could well make out that he did not belong there. We didn't know his intentions or identity, nor were we ready to initiate a conversation. He spoke once he had finished panting. Your friend? Want help? I helped. Made sure that we went back up to the resort with a sharp axe in her hand. What was that? Kushal whispered as we entered the premises. I don't know, but she said something strange, I replied. Nothing she said made sense to me anyway. No, I mean a strange native word. What word? I don't know, but I'll look up once I find some internet. It was not until 3 days later that the cook admitted we were running low on food. Mr. Srijalingam was furious at him for such insolent behavior before the guests. but something Zivan said comforted his rage. He smiled at us and gave the cook a subtle order that chicken be prepared for dinner that night. The cook didn't seem to be confused. He was severely petrified. He fell on his knees before Zivan and we were almost shooed back to our rooms. I couldn't sleep well with all of the queer things happening around. My sleep was broken by a horrific cry at dawn. It was coming from downhill. I rushed to the lawn, to the cliff and peered into the cloudy forest. The girl was looking up and screaming in agony and crying. This was her father's land. A dying man without crop or money. You know the government here has a rule. Foreigners cannot acquire land here. Not even someone from another state. We had to wait till the old man died. Then we took his thumbprint on the papers and made the villagers forget about him. Dead and forgotten are different things, Miss Rowell. Zivan's words ran a chill down my spine. I was standing on a barren cliff with a man who had probably committed a murder. He wouldn't bother much before attempting another. Zivan, what have you done to her? Why is she crying? I almost shouted in plea for help. Oh, nothing much. I asked the cook to bring her chickens so our dear guests could have a feast. The man was brutal. I've made the village people well aware that she is a witch. A Clabber Maid, if you will. That's what they call her in their language. When milk in their house curdles, they throw it in front of her hut as a harness. That's what the bitch thrives on anyway. He seemed so proud of his cruelties that I was scared to my core. I turned to run back so I could call for help, but he grabbed my arm and said, "These people, they trust me, Miss Rowell. Remember? Any woman who proves to be a trouble to me is a witch." I didn't know for how long we had to stay there, but I wanted to help the girl so bad. It felt so helpless that it had become unbearable. So I sneaked out one evening and rushed to the woods below. I found the hut without a door and saw her sleeping inside. I had some milk and biscuits, so I went in to wake her up. She opened her swollen eyes and was taken aback in fright. I consoled her out of the fear and asked if she was hungry. She opened her mouth and what I saw had left me scarred and terrorized. Her tongue was cut away and there was only a lump of distorted flesh inside. I watched her gobbling up the food and smile at me. I didn't come back before nightfall. Everything was silent. When I woke up the next morning, I saw blood rolling down my nostril. Everyone was worried except for Zivan. He knew what he had done. I knew what he had done. I was scared to eat the food because I knew there was something wrong with it. Late in the afternoon, while I was reclining on a wooden bench, Zivan lurked over my shoulder and said, "They often say it in the village, who sees the witch once bleeds his way to death." I broke down mentally. If I asked for help from my friends, the villagers would lynch me to death, for Zivan would tell them I am a witch. If I continued keeping quiet, I would die far from my home. But I kept visiting the young girl, brought her the little food I could, and spent time with her. One evening when I was walking down to her, I saw Srijalingam scrambling up the woods, trying to button his shirt, and the girl stood behind him, naked. This was off limits. My soul broke down. I flew at the demonic little bastard, and before I could get a hold of him, someone struck me from behind. The last words I could hear before I saw the girl leap at Zivan were, "What? Can we have a little entertainment in these stressful times?" My friends found me bleeding by the street downhill. I am in an ambulance, wondering about these illiterate people that the villagers look up to, these ravagers from hell who convince these innocent folks of whatever feeds their superiority. I am wondering if my life really matters if I couldn't even save another. Why are they taking me to a hospital? I am not sick. I am guilty.